the mathematical models show that we should be about to enter into an ice age. And so the bottom line in this, I think, is that where we're dealing, think of that chart I had with the wickedness and the uncertainty. We know the boiling point of water with a certain temperature, or and sea level and air pressure. We don't know that far corner. So what we need to be doing is discerning when we are teaching about sustainability, that we are dealing in an unknown. And that when you are asked a certain question, you say, well, this is what I believe based on what I know now, and this is why I believe that. But I have to be prepared to change my mind, even though it's dealing with science. I have to be prepared to change my mind as I learn new things. So it's a different mindset. When I was young, if it was in the book, it was real. If someone had written it, it must be true. And now with the internet, we know that not everything written is necessarily true.
I don't have much to add. I certainly agree with the importance of narratives because they have a tendency to lead lives of their own also as causal forces. And so we need to both be critical of narratives and at the same time try to, based on what we know about reality, with however much uncertainty, construct narratives that can have causal forces that move in directions that we believe are positive.
Just a very quick follow-on, because I think your comment about that it's not real unless it's sort of written there and then you believe it. That's also one of the points of not having models explicitly in the classroom and in the teaching. Because the whole point with models is that isn't the reality. There is not a question of the truth. It's a question of making a model, testing it, not quite good enough, let's fix it. And doing that in an iterative process and understanding that that's what the nature of science is, not this set of answers in the textbook or wherever, addresses that directly.
So any please.
Well, I appreciate very much for both of three of you mentioning about something actually as a teacher, either in a private school or in the higher education. I think sometimes we need to learn to rethink everything what we want to teach. So I like to put in your photo, teaching teachers. And we just mentioned about what kinds of model we are use, narratives and something. So for this kinds of uncertainty issue like climate change, do you have any example how you teaching teachers? Then we discuss how to do effective to communicate with our students.
I think what we need to do is, with teachers, they all have their own strengths. And when I put up that big chart of mitigation, adaptation, so when teachers look and they say, oh, I'm good at this, I can do this part. And they slowly learn the others. And then you learn simple little things like, I think the point of the difference between weather and climate. Climate is what it should happen. Weather is what happens. It's simple little things to separate it, to realize that it's not about global warming. It is about change and the severity and so on. So there's some simple little things that teachers can learn right off the bat. And then there are things that they can bring that is their own strength to add to it, but then they need to move back. And as you're saying, you don't have to give them all the answers. You can start discussions, and then you move into something around controversial issues, and how does one really learn from that? And you have an expert here in that, in the teaching of controversial issues, etc. That's the important thing of how do you do it. And so teachers, I think you can engage them in different ways, but if you try to get them to get up and lecture about the chemistry of methane and its relationship and so on, it becomes overwhelming. It's not the important thing. Teachers always have to look at what is the big picture, how do we get there?
I mean, I have a different set of experiences, but I think in many ways it's complementary to what you just talked about and have talked about yesterday. What I would say is sort of a framework for this is that often my goal in working with teachers is to help the teachers become learners and be reflective of that learning process, because otherwise they no longer, in a sense, they unfortunately either just teach the way they've been taught, because they've gone through the whole set of school, or they have, in a sense, forgotten what their own process of learning was. That's one point. The other is that the kind of discussion, the kind of process in the classroom, really, I suggest that it move much more to experiential and inquiry based, so that the key point is starting from stimulating, using, provoking the children's questions, not the content that I already have in my head as a teacher. And that means that then once you provoke the question, boy, you can't shut them up. And then you really have a discussion. There is a wonderful book and a lot of work by a woman named Karen Gallas, G-A-L-A-S. And one of the first books she wrote, working with kindergarten and first and second grade, if I remember right, is called Talking Their Way into Science. And it's just wonderful, where she would start conversations because kids had some question in the playground about a plant or a worm or whatever. And then she would use that as a weekly, and often the kids wanted it more than weekly, discussion, not with her, but with each other. I did a workshop, several of them, and I remember one in particular where I used this toy, which I built 20-some years ago. It's a prototype of a museum exhibit. And I had a few of them with me, and I did a workshop. I had 75 teachers in the room, and sort of talked about all these ideas. And then at some point I stopped and I handed out these 3 or 4 copies, and the place just dissolved into, everybody talking, trying this out and doing things and arguing about it. And then I said, oh, and do you do this regularly in your classroom? They look at me, no, not me. And I said, well, why not? That's where the real conversation started, not when I was lecturing. So,
So there's a question.
I have a question for Professor Clark. You have the very important tool to teach the other people how to do things in green. That is a figure of the eco-friendly in the vertical axis and the inequality in the other axis. And you said it's the inverse relations there. Okay, that is counterintuitive to me. For most people like here, people always think if you want the greener, you can buy the photovoltaic system for very expensive system, okay, with very low payback, or you can drive a hybrid car, okay, very expensive, okay, and then we'll show off you are very eco-friendly, okay. In order to be eco-friendly, then you have to be rich. But you have just show a picture that's totally different. Okay, I saw in the left-hand side corner, there's more eco-friendly and more less inequality. Okay, in that part, most of them come from the Sweden or the Northern Europe, except Japan. I wonder, is that because the social welfare system work out much better than other regions? Is that because the green, their economy are more equal, or is that really actually coming from the social system?
Well, the idea that in order to be green you need to be rich, I think we really need to problematize. Because it's based on a belief that if you drive a green car, that you're green. And that's a belief that people that are in marketing and in producing these want us to believe, so that we can feel better about being green. But if again, I get back to material flows, and it may have looked yesterday like I had a problem with consumption, but consumption is so very basic. The rich consume in ways that are not green, and they can have a green car and a green yacht and green heating in their home, but their consumption level is not green. Period. The end. And I didn't get to finish with explaining these maps of the social geography, but the poor are always greener because they can't afford to consume as much. But I think the real benefits that come out of greater equality with regard to sustainability and climate change, it's not only a question of, okay, well, we should make everybody poor and then it will be greener. Although I do think we certainly need to think, like I said yesterday, in terms of ceilings on income and wealth, and in changing our perspective on tax as something necessarily evil. The rich need to be taxed more so that we can afford programs for instance, public transportation, which is greener. So the poor take public transportation. That's greener than a green car. That's greener than a green car. But what you really win out of that is, and that's why I emphasize trust, less political corruption, more trust, which we need to be able to develop narratives and have dialogue. Because in conditions of severe social polarity, we don't have a basis for constructive dialogue, or constructing narratives that we can gather around. Not that everyone's going to follow the exact same narrative, but creating a narrative together that can move us in a better direction.
Okay, because okay.
I would just say one thing very quickly, because we want to have more talk. I really would suggest that those of you here in Taiwan look at the work of Wilkinson. You can find it, Google it, it's so on. The spirit level. Because what it does, you are heavily influenced by the United States. And the idea of Wilkinson's research, that the difference in equality between the wealthy and the poor, as that spreads further and further apart, like Singapore, the United States, etc., there are a whole group of issues that are related to sustainability that pop out. And he gives a 20-minute lecture on the internet that you should at least consider because of the guidance and where Taiwan has moved.
Okay, because of the time limitation, so I need to stop the discussion. We thank all the three speakers giving a very nice talk and the discussion in this section.
We will now have a 20-minute tea break.